all about? And we're not even talking about debilitation or maiming or mutilation here. We're talking about DEATH, death. And I'm citing the authoritative paper on the subject, okay? It's warfare against the population to destroy and debilitate the society, to make it more controllable and easy for takeover. And there are people at the top of the medical cartel who know very well what they are doing. Everybody else is playing along for whatever their reasons. And if anybody comes up to you and says, well, you can't have a conspiracy unless you would have thousands and thousands of people that know about it. Baloney. Everybody plays his part for his own reasons. That's how you get a conspiracy. Only a few people really have to understand and know. Of course, there has to be a lot of lying that goes on, and I'll be talking to you about more of that later. But anyway, you're driving a cab in New York City, and a guy gets into your cab and says, take me uptown to Times Square. And he says, by the way, have you heard about the cabbie down in the village that mowed down 6 people this morning? You say, gee, no, I haven't. You really? And he said, not only that, but up in the Bronx, there was a cabbie that drove his car with 3 passengers out of some kind of a parking garage 16 stories down to the street. And there was another cabbie over in Staten Island who started shooting people. And this all happened when? You say you're the cabbie. This morning. This morning? Yeah, this morning. Why don't you know, Mr. Cabbie? We'll find out the answer to that question and what it has to do with medical death in America when we come back. This is Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones on The Alex Jones Show. Don't go anywhere. This is Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones on The Alex Jones Show. Before we went to break, I was just talking about a story which I'll telescope here. If you were a cabbie in New York City and you suddenly learned that there were cabbies all around you committing violence, you would be aware of it. People would let you know, even if it wasn't in the newspapers. And so if you say that doctors don't really know that the medical profession via pharmaceuticals is killing 106,000 Americans a year, they don't know, they're not aware of it, they're entirely innocent. Come on. Okay, we've got more on that later on. But Sweden is in the news, folks, because guess what they're doing? They're going to eliminate cash. Isn't that wonderful? They're moving into a cashless society. Apparently, they've been ruthlessly getting off of cash for years and years. I think they're down to about 3% of all transactions now involve cash. And now they're saying, hey, let's eliminate it altogether. Why? Cost of printing. Oh, yeah, gee. And people scratch their heads and they say, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Because a society should, first of all, think about the cost of printing. This is the most important thing in the universe, is the cost of printing money. And if we can eliminate that, it doesn't really matter what we do, right? This is the way they're presenting this. Completely absurd, right? And the other thing is, we'll eliminate bank robberies and cash robberies. Oh, yeah, sure you will. Absolutely, because there'll be no cash around. But at the same time, the cybercrime rate will skyrocket. So this is a completely bogus cover story. What they're moving toward is a cashless society for one reason, so that the government and the forces of supernatural government, globalism, can control money and control your money. They know what you spend, everywhere you go, what you do, where it goes. Ha, ha, ha. They've got you. They've got you. That's what a cashless society is all about. That's why Sweden is in the forefront of this, because they're basically saying to the world, you're going to catch up to us soon. We're in the vanguard. This is progressive. This is wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful if you want the government to be able to say that you spent 3 cents in Dubuque, Iowa on New Year's Eve, and they got it tracked exactly, because that is, in fact, what is going to happen. And I'm not being paranoid, I'm being very factual. That's what the system is for. Now, speaking of prices, of course, gas prices are going up through the roof, which is exactly what Obama wants. Oh, did I say that? Because he said Why would I even think of running to be elected if at the same time I were forcing up gas prices? That's ridiculous. No, afraid not. Ever since the Arab Spring broke out in Egypt, I've been writing and telling people, you know, folks, this has a lot to do with the price of oil. Don't forget that. This has a lot to do with the price of oil. For everything else that it has to do with, including domination of resources and people and so on by globalist invading troops and terrorists, thugs, it has to do with the price of oil. In raising the price of oil. Because the price of oil is dependent upon, quote, perception about oil, which in turn is regulated by what media says about perception about oil. Yeah, it's that insane. Oh, yes, the price of oil is going up again today because, obviously, of the turmoil in the Middle East. I saw these headlines on and on and on. What turmoil? No straits or canals were being threatened. Nothing was happening. But there was enough of an appearance, you see, of turmoil to start the ball rolling. And that happened in Egypt, and it's been going on ever since. And now we have the threats. We'll cut off the canal. We'll do this. And the price keeps on rising. And why is this part of Obama's agenda, which is to say simply the globalist agenda? Because Obama, Bush, whoever, Clinton, doesn't matter. This is the globalist agenda because, of course, we can move into Greenville and Green City. We can now say, well, guess what? We've got all kinds of alternative energies now, like windmills that we can set up everywhere that are suddenly cost effective because now that it costs $10 to buy a gallon of gas at the pump, well, you could blow through a tube in your house and produce energy that would be useful because it costs $10 a gallon at the pump. This green agenda includes cap and trade, includes all of this that is going to destroy industry worldwide. This is Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones. We'll be back with more on this after the break. This is Jon Rappoport sitting in for Alex Jones on the Alex Jones Show. And very happy to have Mike Adams, the health ranger, with us now, who's going to preview what he's going to talk about in the next hour. Mike Adams of Natural News. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hello, John. Thanks for having me on. Great to be on with you today. You're doing an awesome job, by the way. I love what you're covering, and I hope to chat with you more. Coming up here on the Alex Jones Show at the top of the next hour, we're going to be going over the linguistic breakdown of the deceptions behind Obama's executive order, the National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order. We'll be breaking down the language to show you exactly what it means between the lines, behind the scenes. So despite what they're saying publicly, we want you to understand what it really means underneath all that, behind the curtain, so to speak. Also, we've got some breaking news about the Rawsome Foods raid and the legal persecution of James Stewart. We've got an inside update coming up that I'll share with you. It's brief. It's not a huge breaking story yet, but it is some detail that you'll want to hear about. We've got all of that, plus a discussion between myself and Jon Rappoport, who's hosting today, at the top of the next hour. So stay with us. We've got all that coming up here on the Alex Jones Show. Back to you, John.
Thanks very much, Mike. We'll see you in the next hour.
Sounds good.
Mike is a great guy and a great pioneer for the 21st century in the issue of health freedom. We're talking about gas prices in the last segment. When the gas prices get high enough, all sorts of things become economically viable. You know, you can have bizarre contraptions that would not be cost effective, you know, in any sane society, and all of a sudden, hey, we got $12 gas. All sorts of things work. But the real danger, of course, is what they're calling cap and trade. This is the idea that coming in behind gas prices, the globalists can initiate a fake, I underline that, green objective to limit industrial production on the planet to such a degree that it drives people out of business all over the place and bankrupts companies. And then the elite corporations, mind you, stay out of it. They are fine because they can trade and buy pollution credits under whatever name they're listed. They get exemptions. They get waivers, as we've seen with Obamacare. They get all kinds of exclusions that allow them to keep on doing exactly what they're doing under the guise of these treaty agreements like NAFTA and CAFTA, World Trade Organization. They roam the planet at will, destroy whatever is in their path. They can bring in intelligence services, and they do, and they can bring in troops, and they do. They can bring in all kinds of forward deployment in order to make their conquest of populations that we're seeing now throughout the Middle East and in Africa work for them, because they want the resources. They want the rare earth minerals that China is now saying, hey, we're going to hold back on shipping rare earth minerals. That makes it even more urgent to go into Africa under the guise of humanitarian aid. We're here to help you. Yes, it's medical care. It's this. Rebuilding. We care. We're concerned. We want to give you a glass of water, a shot of a vaccine, whatever, to make it look good. But under the surface, it's all about conquest. Mega corporate, mega globalist conquest on the continent of Africa, on any continent that has the resources. And the labor, not so important to the globalists. Not so important. It's mainly, we want the land, we want the resources. That's the way it works. Hope you understand that. Hope you really get the picture of how this operates. Because can you think of anything more ridiculous than a man in a white coat with a lot of drugs and medicines getting off a plane somewhere in Africa as if he's a hero and going into a village saying, going to save all of you people. Yeah, save us from what? With what? Well, with my medicines and my vaccines. Really? Is that right? Well, let me tell you something, folks. Just between you and me, okay? Just between you and me. What's been killing Africa and every poverty-stricken area of the world since the beginning of time is contaminated water supplies, starvation generation to generation, overcrowding, lack of basic sanitation. You want to learn something about the history of health and medicine in the West? That's what you learn. When you eliminate those for real, forget the medicines and the vaccines. When you eliminate those, you bring about a state of health. Then you show you care. Then you are concerned. Then you are contributing something to welfare of people. That's not what's happening in Africa, not what's happening in Latin America. It's not what's happening anywhere in the world, in any poor country. Because why? Because if you maintain dirty, contaminated water and overcrowding and lack of sanitation and so on, what do you get? You get debilitation, you get weakness, and you get death. Easier to control, easier to control. It's all part of the operation, folks. There's the military aspect of the operation of going in there and securing the resources through some phony war that's staged between two sides. And there's the medical aspect, and you better believe it. And if you don't understand the importance of the medical aspect, you're not clued in. You don't really have a clue. Okay. Obama has been making all kinds of declarations recently, and Mike and I are going to discuss that in the hour upcoming. But there are some things to say about this. Executive order updated. Yes, we know that Bush issued a very similar order. This is only making a few changes, and Clinton did, and so forth. Okay. But it's a basic reiteration of the power of the president, which means the ruling authority to whom the president owes his allegiance, to basically control all of the resources of the country and destroy the country. We can arrest you. We can kill you if we decide that you're a combatant. That's already been established. And in this executive order, what is completely blurred over, most recent executive order, is the difference between peace and war, you see. Because emergency measures that were announced in the executive order had to do with things like, we can take over industries for military production and so on and so forth, running through the entire society, what can be taken over by the government. We saw some of this in World War II. But